With the sun shining, there is no better place to begin a review. Hola y bienvenido a Barcelona, España. Hello and welcome back to the Done Deal YouTube channel, and today we're in Barcelona and we're here to test drive Mazda's CX-5. This is the 2022 version. It's undergone a little bit of a facelift, and in this review we're going to be discussing what the changes are with the facelift, as well as of course the prices in Ireland, and checking out the car as a whole. What are the engines, what's it like to drive, luggage capacity, space, all the things that you want to know. And of course we're going to be seeing who this type of car might suit. So make sure to subscribe if you'd like to search for cars for sale, or more specifically for Mazdas for sale in Ireland from over 1,000 trusted dealers. Then hit the link up there. Now let's get into the review. To begin with, and to put things into context, last year the CX-5, it equated to nearly 30% of Mazda's sales in Ireland. In fact, it's their second best selling car after the CX-30. So this facelifted version does kind of have a little bit riding on it. So in this video, as I said, we're going to be discussing what the facelift changes are. But in terms of pricing, well, they start at just under 37,000 euros in Ireland, and you can spec it all the way up into the 60s. So spec is going to be very important, but for now let's talk about some of these changes. So the biggest changes are to do with the front and rear. That's where you notice them the most. So to begin with, this front bumper, it's a little bit more aggressive. You'll see some lines here. The headlights have changed too, and the grille itself's different. Now one thing you will see is a change in color pattern in the grille. Now this red is for the Humura, but there's different colors throughout the product range. Here on the rear, I think the standout feature is the lights have changed quite a lot, but as a whole it's just a little bit more aggressive. They've accentuated a bit more on the lines and the creases throughout the boot, and it's the same on the front. It just has a bit more presence and it just is a little bit meaner. Also, I can't glance over the fact that is a real exhaust. Mazda has also very generously added 2 new colours, which actually one of those is very, very, very nice. And they've added some new wheels to the lineup, but most importantly, they've added 2 new grades or trim levels or specifications, however you want to call it. And those are the New Ground and the Humura. Now this is the Humura. I'm going to be talking a bit more about those spec and the lifestyle that they kind of suit, because that's really where Mazda are kind of diving into with this, is making the car suit the customer. And that's something that I definitely want to answer, is who buys a CX-5? And in my opinion, it kind of varies. As a whole, it's someone who wants a little bit of space, maybe has a family, some young children, but also needs a bit of boot space. With that said, the Humura is a little bit more of a sporty spec, whereas the New Ground is targeted a little bit more towards an outdoors active lifestyle customer. In summary, there are 10 different colours, there's 6 different grades to choose from, and there's a number of different engines. So we're going to go for a drive, discuss some of this stuff, and also talk about what it is like to drive, because there's been some improvements in the suspension and a few other bits too. As you sit in here, it has to be said, it's very, very premium. Now we'll be talking a little bit more later on about the cabin and the finish, but what I will say is at a first glance, it's very, very comfortable. Everything you touch and feel is really, really good quality. I really like Mazda steering wheels, but more on that later. More importantly, what are we driving? So I mentioned earlier, this is the Humura, and actually this particular one has got the 2.2 litre diesel. It's the Skyactive-D, and it's got 184 PS, I think over 400 newton meters of torque. Around town, it's actually quite noisy. It's a little bit grunty, you can hear the diesel, and if you are driving around town, I'd actually advise going for the Skyactive-X, the 2 litre petrol. I drove it earlier. It's a lovely engine, but you really have to get up through the gears and up through the rev range to feel the power, whereas here all your power comes on at 2000 revs, which is brilliant because it's almost at your right foot constantly. Now I have to kind of excuse things because you're not able to get this engine with this spec in Ireland. So if you want the 2.2 litre, the 4-wheel drive, which this one is, you're gonna have to get it with the GT Lux, which is the highest of specs, so it's gonna be around 60,000 euros. However, I don't necessarily think you need that. I think, to be honest, just the ordinary front wheel drive 2.2 litre diesel is good, or even the petrol. It depends on your type of driving. If you're doing long commutes or you're doing a lot of motorway mileage, you'd be mad not to go for the diesel. So in terms of boot space, now I've just noticed this CX-5, genius. Anyway, it's an electric tailgate, and there's about 506 litres, which is very kind of actually maybe on par, slightly smaller than some of its competitors, but it is quite practical. There's a little bit of storage under here, some tying points, and the seats don't actually fold in a 60-40 split, but rather a 40-20-40, which is quite handy. So one big improvement that Mazda have done with the new facelifted CX-5 is they've improved the suspension. Now, truth be told, I actually have never driven the old CX-5, so I'm probably not the best person to vouch for if it's that much better. However, what they've done is they've allowed it for a little bit more room in the spring, and they've also improved the dampeners, meaning that when you kind of roll over potholes or little speed bumps, you don't feel it as much, and it kind of all contributes to that refined feeling that you get when you drive it. And it does, it feels a lot more premium than some of its competitors. I know every car is nowadays getting better and better and better, and it's becoming stiffer content. And maybe the infotainment system is not as sophisticated as some of its competitors. To the best of my knowledge, I can't seem to connect it to Apple CarPlay wirelessly, but it is an overall feeling, and it's an emotion that you receive when driving it. You do feel like you're in something a little bit more special. I actually think the closest thing I can compare it to in many ways is something like a Volvo XC40, of the way it makes you feel. In the rear, it's actually quite comfortable. I got chauffeured around in one earlier and it's lovely. Knee space is plentiful, good bit of head space. The black colour choice here with the leather and the roof lining, it's a little bit dark. ISOFIX points, easily accessible, but this is where it gets really, really cool. And no, I'm not that excited about an armrest. There's 2 drink holders on it though, and there is a cool little storage way here with some USB charging points. But what really excites me is there is heated seats in the rear. Now that is a commodity that we usually see in a Mercedes S-Class. Being a modern car, it's got a variety of driving aids. I think the most useful of which is adaptive cruise control. So when the car in front of you slows down, you slow down too. But it also has lane assist, and one of my biggest pet peeves in modern cars is actually lane assist. But weirdly, it's also one of my favorite things when it's done right. And I think, to be fair to Mazda, they've done a pretty stellar job of it, because it's not intrusive. It will stop you veering out of your lane, and it will help you kind of take a slow bend on a motorway, but it doesn't give out to you when you're just marginally too close to the center line, which I think is really, really nice. Around back roads like this, it does roll into the corners a little bit, and I think that's probably the trade-off of having that kind of improved suspension that absorbs potholes and speed bumps a little bit extra, is that when you go into a corner, it does kind of throw you in a little bit more. But this isn't designed for enthusiastic driving. But if you do want to, there is flappy paddles here so you can select your gear, or you can also do it down here on the gearbox. The gearbox itself, it's a 6-speed automatic. I drove the manual one earlier, and I think Mazda do one of the best manual gearboxes in the game. Really, really involving. However, the type of car this is, I actually don't think it's worth having a manual. It's pretty better off being an automatic. It just suits it a little bit better. It's a big SUV. What I will say though is, I believe it's about 4,000 euros to upgrade it to an automatic. It will in some ways future-proof your car. Down the line, it's going to be more desirable in 4 or 5 years. We're seeing automatic car sales skyrocket year on year. They're increasing in market share. Now, as you can see, we're on the motorway and it's just clean sailing, really, really smooth. I'll just turn on my adaptive cruise control and off we go. One other thing I really like, and again, we see this in a lot of modern cars, but it comes up with the speed limit in front of me on the dash, which means that in a foreign country, I know the speed limit, because there was so many times today when I picked this car up from the airport and took it for a drive that I was thinking, oh, what speed limit is it here? So that's really, really handy. And last but not least, and potentially one of the most important parts, is the cockpit itself. Now, I'm running out of daylight and I'm on a busy road, so if you hear noises like this one, it's cars going by. However, the cockpit here is actually sublime. It's really, really nice laid out. So you definitely feel like it's wrapped around you and you're in a cockpit as opposed to the front of the car. Now, basically to break it down, up here you've got a 10-inch screen. Now, I think that starts at maybe a 7 or an 8-inch. The 10-inch screen, it does look really, really good, and your sat nav fills the whole screen. It's very crisp graphics and it's quite modern too. Then here you've got your climate control. Now, brace yourself for this one, because yes, we have a heated steering wheel. Yes, we have heated seats. But here on the Homura, we also have cooled seats. And I'm not gonna lie, there was a time earlier on where I was getting a little bit sweaty down there, and that came into play really, really nicely. And then down here is actually where you control this. So this isn't touchscreen, which whilst it's a little bit inconvenient, it does mean, other than me just touching it there, you don't get smudge marks. And it's all controlled on here down on the dial, and it's actually pretty intuitive. They've made it quite simple. You essentially have five or six options. You have information, entertainment, communications, navigation, and settings. One drawback to this is, as far as I can see, you still need a wire to connect up Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which is a little bit of a shame. Then over here, driving, so the steering wheel, it's so nice, as I said, and it's completely adjustable. So if you've got abnormally long arms or abnormally short arms, you're okay. Now on the right hand side here, you have everything to do with your cruise control. So whether that's the distance between you and the car in front of you, or the speed, or anything like that. And then on the left hand side, you've got both your phone, your volume, and your radio kind of controls, but also you can change the screen that you see here in front of me. And that's maybe one place that Mazda's lagging. You only get this small little screen down here, as opposed to something in the Volkswagen group where you get a big digital display. But it doesn't really bother me. However, there is something nice and just quite captivating with those big infotainment screens right there. And that's essentially it. When it comes to using things like your 360 camera, you can press the button here, or of course when you're at low speeds maneuvering, it comes up here. It's really crisp, really helpful actually. And it also has your things like your stop start. You can turn it off. One thing I always really like about Mazdas is I think it remembers that you had it off, which is handy. And same again with lane assist, so you don't have to turn it off every time you get into the car. The last thing that's really cool, but I'll never be able to capture on camera, is the heads-up display. So it shows you the speed limit, it shows you your satellite navigation. So if you've got to take a third exit at a roundabout up ahead, it says it there. And that's just really handy and safe, because it means you don't have to take your eyes off the road to go look at this screen, but instead it's right there in your vision. And that's basically the inside. Another thing is wireless charging, which is also really handy. So, after flying to Barcelona, test driving a few different variants, what's my verdict? Well, it's really, really good. I think it would be unfair of me to give a comprehensive review because I've only got to spend a couple of hours with it, but I do think the facelift, it looks a lot more modern, a lot more aggressive, and it seems like the design team have really come into their own and gone with what they really wanted to do, which I'm a big, big fan of. As a whole, the CX-5, it's a great option in the segment. It's really, really premium. It's got plenty of space, and I actually quite like that the engines are a 2.2 diesel and a 2-litre petrol. But anyway, that is Done Deal's review here in Barcelona. A big thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed it, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to search for Mazdas for sale, you can hit the link up there. And until the next time.